This is a podcast from the SportsPro Insider Series. Hello to you all and welcome once again to the SportsPro Podcast. My name is Owen Connolly. I'm the editor-at-large at SportsPro. Hope you're well. Very happy to be back. Very happy to be bringing you another podcast from the SportsPro Insider Series. We're staying in the world of OTT and broadcast, but this time taking in a couple of different perspectives from a couple of rights holders with a forward-thinking reputation in the digital media space. Our guests are Rufus Hack, the Chief Operating Officer at Golf's European Tour, and Charlotte Offord, Senior Marketing Director for the UK at the National Football League. Lots of ground to cover. We'll be looking at approaches to developing an international media strategy, the balance between D2C and linear options, the importance of great original digital content, best practice in pricing, the NFL Game Pass, Golf TV, and lots more besides. That's coming up, and it's a really informative session. But before we begin, and I know how much you must all love this bit, I just need to call your attention to a few things. First up, another nod to the second expanded edition of the SportsPro OTT Awards. We're going to be celebrating the pioneers of sports broadcasting on the 2nd of December in a whole load of categories, 15 by my count, and marking an extraordinary year in every sense of the word. If your company has done work in OTT and digital broadcasting that you think deserves recognition, you have until the 25th of September to submit an application. All the info you'll need is at sportspro-ottawards.com. Just make sure you get there before that 25th of September deadline. Lots more to come elsewhere from SportsPro and the events team in the rest of this year. SportsPro Live. It's getting close. We're going to be driving the new era of sport on the 16th and 17th of September. That's just a couple of weeks away now. We've got a brilliant lineup of speakers and some really intriguing networking opportunities with AI matchmaking, a video happy hour. It gets better from there. Find out more at sportsprolive.com, and you can expect more great stuff, but with a defined continental focus at SportsPro Asia on the 21st and 22nd of October. SportsProAsia.com is your resource there. And do look out for more on the next edition of the SportsPro OTT Summit, keeping the 1st to the 3rd of December open. There will be updates in due course on sportspro-ott.com. They're going to be virtual summits with meaningful insights, real opportunities to connect. We're very excited about it. It's a departure for all of us, but we're sure we're going to make the very, very best of it. And we're still really excited about what's left to come in the SportsPro Insider Series, with sessions on athletes in business and on leadership in the next few weeks. All the many months of sessions are available for free and on demand at sportsproinsiderseries.com. Do check that out. If you need a bit more of a flavour of it, well, that's what we're here for. Let's see what Rufus Hack and Charlotte Offord have to say. Asking the questions is SportsPro Managing Director Nick Meacham. You'll be hearing from me again very soon. Enjoy the podcast.
This is the SportsPro Podcast.
Great to be here with two fantastic organisations and fantastic people. So what we'll first do is I'd like to introduce Rufus Hack, Chief Operating Officer from the European Tour and Ryder Cup. And with him, we've got Charlotte Offord, the Senior Marketing Director for the UK for the NFL. I'm going to throw it to Rufus initially. Rufus, could you give us a bit of an understanding, a bit more about your role remit within European Tour and Ryder Cup and how that sits within the dynamic?
Of course. Afternoon, Nick, and afternoon, everyone on the stream. So I'm the Chief Operating Officer at the European Tour and Ryder Cup. We run about 45 events each year across the globe in 5 different continents. And as part of my role, I look after all of our content functions. So we distribute our content to about 60 broadcasters globally. And then we're also the largest producer of golf worldwide. So we're fully vertically integrated. We produce all of our own live and non-live content, and then produce that through a company called European Tour Productions. And then outside of the content ecosystem, also look after some of our other functions like legal, finance, and a few other departments. But interesting times for sure, Nick.
Good stuff. All right, thanks, Rufus. We'll go into a bit more detail shortly. Charlotte, could you give us a bit more of a rundown as to your role and where it sits within the NFL business?
Yeah, thanks, Nick, and thanks for having me today. So my role is I head up the marketing team for the UK office, and mainly responsible for driving anything fan growth and engagement across any of our fan-facing platforms. So specifically looking at things like content and promotion for our media partnerships, managing all of our digital platforms, and then diving into specifically to our UK social channels as well. Quite a broad remit across the digital space, and then also obviously on a usual year we would usually host 4 London games as well.
So just if you could elaborate a little bit more, just to paint a bit of context about how the NFL UK sits within the international NFL business. There's a bit more detail. So big main focus on those live events. What else is in that remit, and how does that differ to, say, headquarters?
Yeah, so I think the UK office is kind of one of the main international territories that we've expanded to as a business. And we've been playing games in the UK for about 12, 13 years now. And so starting off, really with one game at Wembley Stadium, and then expanding over the years to playing 4 games a year, and with the investment last year with the new Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. So, we've really tried to kind of expand our remit from a games perspective. But then I think on the fan growth side, the main point of our office and the main aim for us is really about how do we drive growth of the sport? How do we drive fan growth? How do we drive participation? How do we get people, buying tickets, consuming our digital and social content? We try and drive a locally relevant narrative that will kind of help us to then engage with sports fans and general public in the UK to try and drive them into what is something, I guess, new to this country.
Cool, good stuff. And now, obviously, we're here to talk about OTT specifically, and this session's all about integrating OTT into the wider commercial strategy. Maybe the first thing we could do is just paint the picture of what is the OTT strategy look like for both organisations. Rufus, if we can start with you, where do you guys sit within the OTT landscape currently?
Yeah, of course. So we've had quite an interesting journey on the sort of evolution of OTT over the last 6 or 7 years ago. We were actually a really early adopter with an OTT platform about 7 or 8 years ago called European Tour Television. And the reason we did that wasn't really for commercial reasons at the time. It was more so we could say to our sponsors and our partners, we had truly global coverage. As I said before, we have about 50 or 60 territories covered by our broadcast agreements, but there's still a long tail of places where we're not relevant and we don't have distribution. So for us, it was about being everywhere globally so that we could showcase our global membership. I mean, we have people playing on our tour from about 35 different countries. So it's important that we have that global footprint. And then about 3 or 4 years ago, we looked at the OTT product and we actually thought it's not actually doing much for our business. It was very low in terms of eyeballs, and actually the commercial structure and the economics really didn't stack up. And we were pretty subscale. We weren't really able to invest as much as we needed to acquire customers. And we also didn't have the premium rights that we would need to actually have a compelling value proposition, because we'd sold that in our big markets to the Skies and the Fox Australias and the Canal Pluses and the NBCs. So actually we were sort of in a position of what do we do next? We've started on this journey, but actually we haven't found a construct that really works for the European Tour and the Ryder Cup. And so what we thought about doing, and bearing in mind that golf is a niche sport, we didn't want to be niche within a niche sport and further fragment the market and us have an OTT product that we were doubling down in. PJ Tour have an OTT product. The Masters having an OTT product. We just didn't think that was the right thing to do, because as a golf fan, you don't want to get 5 or 6 different OTT products. You just want to get somewhere you can go as an aggregated vehicle to get all of golf. So we were actually speaking about 18 months, 2 years ago or so with the other golf federations, and we were saying, should we look to pool our rights and as a sports vertical, create a consolidated golf product for people who love golf? And there are 250 million people worldwide who love golf. So that could be a compelling product. Fortuitously, as we were having these conversations, Discovery actually came into the market, and they are very keen on specific industry sports verticals where they think there is high participation, it's a global sport, and there's an opportunity for them to have an ownership position and get significant rights. They did something very similar with cycling a couple of years before. And so then they looked to double down in the golfing space. And so actually they almost came along and acted as this natural aggregator in order that they bought up a lot of golfing rights. And it actually worked really well for us because it meant that we didn't have to spend a lot of money on customer acquisition, on customizing local content. It meant that we could still retain the gatekeeper model in our key markets where we still gave digital rights to our big broadcast clients in our key territories like the UK, the US, and the Nordics. And it meant that we still had this global OTT presence within this wider golf TV proposition. And so that's sort of where we are today. And it's been a really good journey for us. Discovery have been fantastic partners. They've done a great job of building out not just the live product, but the golfing ecosystem. They've got deals with players like Tiger Woods and Molinari. They do a lot of non-live content, a lot of from the clubhouse clips and pieces. And so they're really stoking that engine to try and get to scale. Whereas we found ourselves when we did it 5, 6, 7 years ago, we just couldn't get that scale that made the economics work.
No, I couldn't think of a better partner in this space than someone like Discovery, who's got the technology, the intelligence, and also the cash to invest into something like this. From memory, I can't remember if it's the relationship, but obviously there's PGA Tour, European Tour, and Ryder Cup is basically part of that golf TV offering. Are they also licensing some of or taking on some of your media rights as well as part of that to sub-license out in certain markets, or is it all sitting exclusively in the golf TV platform?
Yeah, no, they are. You're right, Nick. I mean, it's what perhaps 5 or 8 years ago was a very simple picture. If you go and do one big deal and someone would take all of your rights, as I'm sure everyone is aware, has become much more fragmented. So we've got a market by market approach, but in some markets, for example, in Spain, they effectively have become a gatekeeper of our rights. They take the linear rights and they've sub-licensed them to Movistar, who were our incumbent before. And then they've also then, in parallel with that, launched an OTT product called Golf TV in that market to serve what they believe, and I think most people are starting to believe, is an additive audience that you can unlock through an OTT product in addition to your traditional linear presence. In other markets, like Germany, they've just got digital rights, and we've still got our relationship with Sky Deutschland from a linear perspective. And so it is a bit of a hybrid model, but it's great to have a partner like that who gives you that scale. And as you say, investment in technology, investment in customer recruitment, best practice, all of that sort of stuff.
And before we move back to the NFL, just one other question on that. So in terms of the model, without going into too many particulars, but the framework is obviously there's a deal in place there. In terms of getting your commercial partners involved with the Golf TV platform, how does that relationship work? And if you can give any sort of sense just on how the Golf TV deal is structured, even if it's just whether it's a rev share or anything like that, would obviously be interesting to hear. But particularly how you're getting your own commercial partners on board through Golf TV, or do you have to use your own European Tour assets to use as a platform for them to build value?
Yes, it's a great question. So as per a lot of these deals that seem to be more commonplace now, there is an element of skin in the game for the rights holder. So it's not just a total MG. There is an aligned incentive for both parties to drive distribution. And if we drive distribution but beyond certain levels, there is returns that we as the right holder realize. So that's obviously exciting and something that incentivizes us and aligns the partnership. And then in terms of how our commercial partners integrate into it, we actually did a deal with Discovery at the same time as doing the media rights deal. We've also done a deal whereby they have a certain level of inventory on our website and on our digital platforms in order that they can, one, effectively help to funnel traffic through to this aggregated golf TV product, and two, that we can almost cross-fertilize our key corporate partners. I mean, for example, we've got corporate partners who now have done an ad buy and get exposure and distribution through Golf TV, and then vice versa. They've used some of their core deals that they have across the wider Discovery network and funnel them through the European Tour digital platform. So it has been pretty harmonious from that perspective, and a good collaborative partnership.
We'll go back into the business models and then move into the more conversations around the wider commerce opportunities as part of that, because it sounds really fascinating. Charlotte, let's talk a bit more about the NFL's OTT offering. Before we get into a conversation, obviously NFL Game Pass is the main OTT offering that the NFL has. Just before we start talking about that, I'll just remind everyone to please start throwing your questions into the questions tab. There's already a couple coming in now. And looking just quickly at the polls that we ran earlier, it's interesting to see that most people think that COVID-19 has accelerated the OTT industry, both from an content innovation and a consumer uptake perspective. I'd be interested to hear what you guys quick take on that. Would you agree? Maybe Rufus, quickly with you, and then we'll move on to Charlotte.
It's a really interesting one. If you ever look at a market report these days, they always say pay TV is looking at low single-digit declines over the next couple of years, and OTT is going to grow by 15 to 20%. I mean, we've been so fortunate over the last 20 years as an industry to be in one of the world's great business model of pay TV, where people have been paying 70, 80, 90 pounds a month every month. And then we as rights holders have been able to benefit through that, through big, lumpy rights fees. I suspect, yes, OTT will continue to accelerate. I suspect COVID has led to more cord cutting, but I do think there needs to be an element of consolidation, as we talked about previously. I mean, the big brands, global franchises like Charlotte and the NFL, they can stand alone and probably fight their own weight and drive further penetration. But I think for some of the smaller properties, I think consolidation is going to be required in order to accelerate OTT further.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. And Charlotte, what's your thoughts? Do you think this situation's actually accelerated consumer uptake? Have you guys actually seen? Well, I imagine because you're in an off season, you wouldn't necessarily see subscribers going up dramatically yet, but obviously we're building towards a season. Season's not far away. Do you think you're going to see actually a bit of a spike? Is that some of the trends in your marketing data looking like you're going to see this more interest than ever?
Yeah, I mean, I obviously certainly hope so. I think, one of the outcomes of the pandemic is that, people are spending a lot more time at home, and, companies are getting rid of offices, and, so that kind of gets rid of the commute. And so, I think people are trying to find more and more things to fill their time with the extra bandwidth that they have. And so I do think that streaming services and online e-commerce services will increase in subscription. So I certainly hope that's the case. We're obviously, as you say, at the beginning of our journey into the season. So I think and none of us really know how the next few months will play out in terms of the climate. But I think if it continues and those patterns do continue, then I certainly think it will drive OTT products generally.
Cool, good stuff. Now let's talk about Game Pass. Could you give us a bit more of a detailed description as to what it is, how the setup is, and also a bit of the business model behind it? So give us a bit more insight there.
Sure. Yeah, so as you saw in the video, NFL Game Pass is our main OTT product, and what it does is give our fans internationally access to live games outside of any of the exclusive rights that are held by our local broadcasters in each of the markets. It gives them access to highlights, which I think is really important given the time zones and the challenges that we have with time zones with it being a US sport. And then it gives access to NFL Network, being a dedicated NFL TV channel that exists in the US, and a huge library of TV shows and content that's either produced from our NFL Films company, produced by our 32 clubs, because they're often always producing their own content, and then also locally in each of the international markets, we also try and produce some of our own content that drives that locally relevant narrative. So again, Game Pass is the place to kind of watch everything all in one. The offering is evolved over the last few years, but I think is really split into a few different levels. And so starting off, we have our pro offering, which is everything you saw in that video and more, and what I just kind of outlined. It's really aimed at those fans at the top of the funnel in terms of it is a $143.99 price point. So it's a fair price point, but I think for a whole season you do really get a lot of access to a lot of incredible content. And then the second level down is our essential, and it's an internal word, but we call it a SKU. But essential product is really someone that you get less access to content, access to condensed games, access to on demand and red zone, but it's really focused on that mid funnel fan. So someone who likes to catch up on NFL, not necessarily concerned about watching a full game live, but someone that wants to watch it the next day and figure out everything that happened for their team or for just the sport generally the next day. And then lastly, and this is kind of a new one in the last few years, but something we've seen a lot of success in and we continue to grow is our free product. And so essentially this is aimed at new funnels, and it's really that kind of opening of the funnel to an opportunity to get the product in front of new emerging fans that, without making them have a payment commitment to consuming the product. So, it is obviously has only limited access, but it gives them access to NFL Network. So that TV channel I spoke about, 24/7, always on NFL. That has some great shows on it. And then what we do with it, we also then drop a few episodes of different content pieces that we think will be appealing to a new or casual fan. Through periods throughout the season that they can consume, and then every week 5-minute highlights. So again, if they want to start to see the big touchdowns, the big plays, they can consume that in 5 minutes the following day. So ultimately, that product is about allowing people to see the value of the product, and then our job from there is really about how do we ladder those people up into a paid product in the future? How do we give them a user experience that they're going to love and give them the content that they want and they're excited by, so they then see the value in paying, to ladder up to a paid subscription later on.
It's interesting because the NFL in particular is probably as a D2C offering is probably one of the most comprehensive. It's been the market probably as long as any that I can think of from a D2C perspective. And it's also one of the most expensive in the market, relatively speaking. Now, in terms of how does decisions get made around the pricing model, I don't know if that's something that you get involved with, but the price also with the pricing model, does it shift throughout the year once the season starts, or is it just sort of 12-month windows all the time?
Yeah, so I mean, I think we are a relatively short season, and so obviously as you go through the season and there are less and less games left, the price we'll put pricing strategies in place to ensure that we're making the offering fair for someone new that's joining. So, if you are joining mid-season, we wouldn't expect you to be paying kind of the full price that someone paid at the beginning of the season, because you are accessing less content. But, I think we continue to look and monitor our pricing strategies and trying to make them as fair as possible, given the breadth of content that we are putting on there. And I kind of touched on it earlier, but, with the time zones and, the number of games, we kind of continue to evolve the offering and try to think about new and different ways that are going to appease our fans in different markets to ensure that we're getting the right level of content, or the content in the right way that suits them personally.
So with your model then, because it's sort of seasonal, let's say, rather than annual in terms of the model, how's the marketing side of that work in terms of managing churn rates and driving subscriptions and keeping people signed up to the platform? Do you have to effectively I guess it's almost like a football season where you've got to restart with the season ticket holders year on year to try and get them to come back to sign up for the year? Is that the model you have to do, or is it kind of a recurring model? How does that play out?
Yeah, so we have an auto renew in place. So for those that are kind of opted in, and there is a strategy in place in terms of the ability for those people to opt out as we get nearer to the season. But there is obviously an auto renew in place in terms of taking payment for the next season, and then outlining the new offering to those fans as we build to the season, to kick off of the season. So that is all the piece that's happening now. And then I think as we go through the season, acquisition obviously becomes the most important for us in the key window right through the season. But ultimately at the start, you really want people to be, I certainly want people to be consuming NFL all season long. That as a marketing director, you certainly want to have your fans engaged week in, week out. But I think it's important that you continue to adapt and create new opportunities for fans, no matter when they're joining within that season period.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk a bit more about business models and driving the fan sign-ups shortly. But let's go to some questions from the audience there. We'll start with the top voted question, which links up to what we were going to talk about already with regards to adoption through COVID as well. But with no fans, how do you engage fans in local markets? So obviously the NFL, US based in particular. Does that market differ from your approach to engaging fans in international markets? Is viewer numbers on OTT enough, or do you look for further engagement? I guess that kind of relates to both of you. Charlotte, do you want to start there?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, as you kind of touched on, we are a US sport, so we aren't, we don't have games all the time, and so we obviously have games usually in this market, but it's 4 games a year, out of hundreds of games a year. So I think naturally for us, our strategy, I think, very much remains the same from an OTT perspective, in terms of we are providing an offering to fans that is very much the same as any normal year from an international perspective, because we're just giving them access to those games to watch from a media landscape view.
Yeah, and Rufus, in terms of the connectivity with fans in local markets, what are you doing to connect with those people, given obviously the competitions that you run are spread all across the world, all across the year? How do you keep that connectivity with fans across all those different marketplaces?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of points on this. I suppose, firstly, this goes back to the macro thing of your own OTT product versus working with an aggregator, because actually it's very hard for us sitting in Wentworth to know exactly what Korean consumers and Japanese consumers and Vietnamese consumers want to see and how to pitch that to them. Hence, having someone who can localize your content in that market is extremely valuable. So typically we work with our core broadcasters to help customize content. And actually, increasingly, we've done deals as a sidebar to our media deals, whereby, as well as them buying the media rights, they've also got an obligation to localize some of our content, and in some cases even put it through our own social platforms in local language content, which has been extremely valuable and really helps to drive the value there. Just on the second point of that, in terms of what we look for in terms of engagement, I mean, one of the things that we've really started to transition on, whether it's through the OTT or through social platforms, is to try and understand at what part on the marketing funnel people are engaging. I mean, we were typically all about awareness until about a year ago, and all we cared about was how many impressions that we had and how many followers that we had on our social platforms. And we've become much more focused now on actually how that translates down the value chain. And we're much more focused on engagement and conversion now, in terms of them opening up significant commercial opportunities rather than necessarily the vanity metrics of followers and some of the more high level metrics. But obviously doing that internationally is critical for us. And just one final point on that, we have actually seen a slight shift over the last 12 months or so into greater engagement outside of our core markets. And I don't know if that's a function of our business or a function of the market, but actually, typically we've been very reliant on UK, US and Nordics and continental Europe in terms of our engagement. We are seeing that broaden now, particularly in Asia and Latin America, and seeing much greater exposure there.
Help us spread the word about the SportsPro Podcast. Subscribe, like and share our content on social. Join the conversation on Twitter with the hashtag SportsProPod. And if you're enjoying our work, why not leave us a rating and a nice review on your podcast platform of choice. And if you want to get in touch, you can send us an email, podcast@sportspromedia.com. The SportsPro Podcast. We're listening too.
Now that sort of content you've been creating, it's great. It's got a great tone of voice. You guys have been producing a whole host of stuff across all your channels. what's the purpose of it? Why are you creating all this great content if you're not driving them to an OTT platform? So why are you doing it? Is it for partners? Is it just to create that awareness? How are you converting it into ultimately monetization opportunities for the tool?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and something we get asked internally quite a lot, because, as you say, we do spend quite a lot at the moment on non-live content and creating this sort of more irreverent stuff around the game. And as you say, we don't have a direct monetization of that through pushing it to an OTT platform. So I suppose the answer is really threefold. One is just brand. It's always good to have your brand out there, and to have it's almost our paid marketing rather than investing in marketing elsewhere. We produce our own content, and we're fortunate to have that in-house facility. The second, and probably the most important, is for our sponsorship relationships. We are fortunate to have a really talented team of people who produce content. And actually, I'd probably say that's become our USP in the sponsorship market now, in terms of providing branded content opportunities for sponsors. And it's really interesting, actually, because when this started, we were effectively, there were some more innovative brands like Enterprise and Hilton and some of those guys who were all over the branded content. And the value of their association with the European Tour was to be able to position their brand in an exciting way through some of this branded content. But your slightly more traditional brands like the Rolexes and the BMWs weren't perhaps so interested in it. And we were almost having to sort of turn their arm to engage them. And now they're almost the most active in this. And it seems, wherever background you're coming from, sponsors, as we all know in the market, are less about hospitality, signage and B2B activations, and all about authenticity of their brand and how they can get it out there in an interesting way. And so by producing this type of content, it does pretty seamlessly get their brands in front of a pretty wide range of audience. So that's probably the key focus of why we've been doing this. And then I think the third reason that we have invested in this space is, I think you alluded to earlier, Nick, in terms of business models in the market are changing. And there's this huge opportunity as rights holders start to know their fans and their customers better to operate in the wider ecosystem. So rather than almost acting as a B2B business where you sell rights to sponsors and you sell rights to media companies, actually we should be the ones who are engaging directly with the end consumer and selling them things, content, activities, experiences, products that sit and exist around our sport. I mean, if we look at golf as an example, people spend about $180 billion a year globally on golf. And we, whether it's ourselves or the PGA Tour or the other majors, don't participate in that at all. And there's a huge opportunity because we've got legitimacy, we've got brand, we've got credibility, we've got the relationship. And particularly some of the digital opportunities that exist, like in the golfing space, tee times or tuition or things like that. There's huge opportunity for us to engage with fans and be a credible brand and have, whether it's a white label product or own product, to broaden out the value mix there. And so they're probably the three reasons that when our board asks why we've got such big cost numbers against this, that's what we're saying to them anyway.
And that's probably a really good segue where you set that for in terms of talking more about the share of wallets discussion about how do we drive revenue and new commercial opportunities for our sports. Particularly, obviously, digital is going to be the heart of that opportunity. And you mentioned a few there that integrate really well into that share of wallet opportunity. So maybe we go Charlotte first. From the NFL's perspective, what other ways that you guys create monetization of your fan base? Let's start with that. And then also particularly what is integrated within your OTT strategy that does that as well?
Yeah, sure. I actually, can I just go back to what Rufus was saying about why create content and why put, huge budgets against the creation of content? I think for us, and I think this probably is relevant for other sports, is you have to give people a reason to care, and I think you create content and you put it on social and you put it on digital because you're trying to create this emotional connection between the person and the sport. And I don't think you can monetize until you've, one, created the emotional connection, and then two, kind of gained their share of mind, and given them that reason to actually care about what you're putting out and care about the sport they're looking at, and then you monetize. And I think it kind of then goes around in a bit of a circle. Once you monetize, you obviously then created another emotional connection with someone because they have purchased something and now are using that product or whatever it is. So I think just wanted to touch on that, because I think that's how we think about why we create content. But I think going back to your second point on key strategies around how we drive share of wallet, and I think for us, and a big thing is data. How do you use your data better? And we've really started over the last 6 months, building out data models that help us understand more about who our fans are, but more about also what is their propensity to next engage with us, and what does that engagement look like. So knowing more about who they are in terms of maybe overlaying some third-party data in terms of finding out more about the customer, but then what are their previous interactions with us look like, and how regular are they? We're somewhat able to predict what are they most likely to do next. And what should we be putting in front of them to do next? So whether that's, are they most likely to buy from Shop next? Are they most likely to play Madden, our game next? Are they even most likely to buy Game Pass next? Because I think it works both ways in terms of taking OTT data and finding out what else they might do, but also taking the wider population of data from every interaction, and then looking at what propensity they have to do another thing and targeting them. And I think then that leads to, how do we become more personalized in our approach? So a lot of the work we're doing is really sitting on the data side and trying to create more personalized customer journeys, so that when we are talking to fans, it isn't just a range of things you might want to do that you could be interested in but probably aren't. It is with it, whatever part of the fan journey that you're in, and based on the engagement levels that you're currently taking, what do we think is the next thing in line for you to do that you should engage with in terms of your avidity of being a fan? And then I think within the within the OTT product, within Game Pass, whilst we'll do that this year and really kind of do some tests throughout the season on the data side, I think it's looking at things like, how does fantasy football drive OTT, and how does OTT drive fantasy? I think both platforms are aimed at such similar audiences in terms of avidity, and they really should complement each other. So working through, we're working on kind of plans around how do we integrate better into fantasy football, and make sure that as people are looking at real-time stats, or logging in to understand what their fantasy scores look like week on week, how are we then making sure that we're trying to monetize the right things to them through that platform?
Okay, yeah, absolutely. So we talked about the data side, absolutely key, and data will only continue to be more important part of everything we do, live and breathe, particularly from a strategic perspective. Rufus, from a share of wallet perspective, again, I guess there's two things. How are European Tour and the Ryder Cup doing that currently? How are they cross-pollinating other revenue streams at the moment, i.e. whether the merchandise side, whether it's the ticketing or other solutions you suggested? And where do you think that's going to get to in, say, 5 years' time? Where do you think you want it to look like, where you guys are tapping into more of those, more opportunities to generate those revenue streams directly into the European Tour, the Ryder Cup, versus helping everyone else? You're helping all these other sport properties and these businesses prosper. How do you make the European Tour, Ryder Cup get the benefits of all the hard work you're putting into building your brand?
Yeah, it's interesting, because obviously the sports markets are flush with private equity money at the moment. And private equity money is not coming in because, I don't think it's coming in because they believe there's a great opportunity on B2B in terms of traditional media or traditional sponsorship. I think they're coming in because they think that sport is pretty resilient and there is a huge growth opportunity in D2C and B2C income streams. And so I'd be surprised if any rights holder, and it sounds like Charlotte and the NFL are doing this, aren't hugely focused on how do we increase our B2C income streams moving forward. And whether that's the core income streams of ticketing and merch, or whether it's developing auxiliary income streams like some of the wider ecosystem and share of wallet, fantasy, gaming, data, all of that sort of good stuff. But I suspect that is going to be the growth engine moving forward. And so that is taking significant focus. One of the things that I think we found is we have a very wide range of rights in terms of the premium nature. So we have the Ryder Cup, which is obviously a premium asset. And then we have 40 other events of varying premiumness based on who's playing and where they are and what the prize fund are. And so what we did when we started to look at our strategy in this space is we said, are we going to be able to get to a position, given the diverse range of our portfolio, whereby we're going to be able to effectively monetize that in 2, 3, 4 years? Because it does require significant investment. It requires significant investment in CRM, in technology, in people, in capability, in marketing. And we've come to the conclusion is, yes, we probably could, but actually having a partner to support us on this journey might be very valuable. So we're actually, we have been engaging with other partners to see whether there is more strategic relationships we can have in the B2C space moving forward. And there's a whole host of players who operate in this space now who have done fantastic jobs and provided a lot of skills that rights holders haven't had historically around understanding data and a lot of the stuff that Charlotte was talking around. So that was quite a long-winded answer to your question, but we are currently considering whether it is right to do it in-house or whether actually we work with a strategic partner on a sort of perimeter of all of these B2C activities.
Just looking towards a couple of questions coming in. Also, could we get the last couple of polls up as well? So get those up and running. Here they are. And there's one other one there as well. Will the media rights market trend towards a greater fragmentation of rights or a great consolidation rights or an even split mix? That's a really interesting question, because I think obviously, Rufus, you've talked about what you guys have done with golf, in consolidating the golf side of things into the Golf TV channel. What's your take on that? Do you think generally we're going to see just more consolidation from the rights market, particularly across OTT, but also more widely, consolidation of rights into centralized platforms? Or do you think we're actually going to see more fragmentation first?
I would probably say it depends as an answer. I mean, we've probably done 20 or 30 broadcast and rights deals in the last couple of years. And there's almost been two schools of thoughts amongst broadcasters who we've been working with. You've almost got the more visionary broadcasters who are looking to, they recognize that content is always going to be king and you're always going to be able to commercialize content. So they've wanted to do super long-term deals, 8, 10, 12-year deals at a significant premium. So they lock down the rights. And so however the market evolves, they're covered and they own the content. And then you've got the other side of the coin who are actually looking at doing shorter deals and looking to beat you up over price. So I think in some of your core markets and for tier one properties, you probably will see a bit more consolidation because people will want to own every platform. I suspect with tier two properties and then in the smaller markets, you're likely to see a greater degree of consolidation. And we've already seen it with the West Coast players coming in, the YouTubes, the Facebooks, the Twitters, and taking slices of rights. It's for me, it's a bit of a red herring at the moment, that one. I don't think we've necessarily seen that at scale. And it's all fair and well for Facebook to say, we don't need to pay you rights because we're your best marketing channel, but you still need to get the compensation from somewhere. So I think it's probably a mix of consolidation for some of the big stuff and then fragmentation for the tail.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with what you said there. Now, looking at some of the questions, let's go to this one here. This is about the recent announcement, Charlotte, with regards to the 5-year deal the NFL has signed with Sky. It includes its own dedicated channel for the first time, and that, I guess, joins the likes of Formula One, golf, and cricket. I think off the top of my head, Sky's having dedicated sports channels. A huge coup, and I think a huge opportunity. Obviously, I'm no doubt as a marketer, you're quite excited about having this as something to get your teeth into. And the question really is, how can you leverage that interest for your own digital offering in the market? And I think I would add to that, there's obviously the opportunity to create much wider engagement, connect with much bigger audiences as Sky will Sky relationship will no doubt help you generate a wider fan base. But again, what is the relationship? I'm always curious to hear about this. What is the relationship like then about how proactive you can be in driving people to the Game Pass and digital offering you've got? Do you have to kind of tread carefully, or is it very much go for it as a marketer?
Yeah, no, I mean, look, I firstly would say, obviously it's a really exciting new partnership for us with Sky. And I think having a new dedicated channel as part of that agreement, is certainly a testament to the growth of the sport, and, a huge commitment on Sky's part as well. So yeah, obviously as a marketing, from a marketing lens, I'm very excited about it. I think, the way our media strategy works is that media partners have different rights, and I think they all really complement each other. So to your point around how do you kind of, I guess, manage OTT versus the Sky relationship, I think, they both actually offer different services and different products. I think if you are a Sky Sports customer, you are probably a fan of multiple sports, and what the channel is giving you is the opportunity to consume more NFL on a daily basis, and also still have your usual appointment to view on a Thursday, Sunday, or Monday night. If you have Game Pass, it's a dedicated NFL platform, that gives you full access to the full library of everything going on. And from a live game perspective, which I think is the most important part of this, is, Game Pass has access to live games and content that Sky doesn't, and Sky has access to live games and content that Game Pass doesn't. So, I think from a fan, yes, there may be a choice to be made, but I think, honestly, they have such different offerings that there is really a world where they complement each other and both sit next to each other rather than competing against each other.
How closely do you have to work with? Will you be working? Obviously, you're the UK head of UK marketing side of things here. How closely are you working with Sky Sports then to coordinate the marketing initiatives, or do you relatively work in silos?
No, really, really closely. So, we have a great relationship with the Sky Sports team. We've been working with them for 25 odd years now, as the league. And I think, over the last few years, we've really kind of grown that relationship. So I have been working with them. My team has been working with them really closely to really develop the channel, look at what is the right content to be putting on the channel, what is the right mix of shows that we should be putting out there. And then also on the digital side, how do we help them, position the best offering across social, and then how do we also try and integrate some of our own products. So one example is, we've done it for a couple of years, is our fantasy product. How do we integrate that into the Sky Sports platform, and leverage the relationship we have with Sky to bring people, make people become more fans of the NFL. So really closely, and they're a great team to work with.
Rufus, now the Golf TV relationship's been now in place for a while. I'm curious to hear how you think it's gone so far. I mean, the model, the concept, I think on the face of it, I know when I heard it, I think we saw one of the launch of it to some extent by Discovery at one of the events we ran in Madrid with, I think it was, is it Alex Kaplan?
Alex,
there? Yeah, was helping sort of launch that off. How have you seen that develop, and where do you think it's going to evolve or go to the next step? So what should we expect as a consumer and also in the industry to see from the Golf TV in the coming years?
I think you'll see it become a more compelling proposition to a wider range of demographics and segments. I think at the moment it's a compelling product for the real golf enthusiasts, because it is live and non-live content. I think it will become much more interactive and more of an ecosystem around golf. And I know lots of the other auxiliary income streams that we've been talking about, they're thinking about, like equipment and tuition and holidays and lots of the stuff that sits around the core product. So I suspect it will become increasingly engaging. I actually think, and I see that Carlo's on the chat listening in, it was built by Delta Tray. I think the technology has been really robust. They haven't had any issues with that at all. And so from that perspective, it's been a real success. I think if you asked them a year and a half ago, 2 years, whether the adoption from a B2C level might have been slightly quicker, they might say yes. But I don't think any of us have ever built an Excel model and not been slightly bullish with how quick adoption and pickup's going to be. So I suspect that's probably par for the course. But I think they're well positioned for further growth. They've built the compelling product now, and now it's all about getting it into market and getting adoption. I mean, I'd be interested to know from Charlotte's perspective for the NFL. I mean, given they're an exemplars in this space, and they've obviously someone who's driven great adoption, whether actually that has been as quick as they would have anticipated it in Europe and the UK.
Sorry, Rufus, do you mean in terms of the growth of Game Pass?
Yeah, exactly. And the number of subs and stuff you've had.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've continued to see steady growth, and I think it is always a challenge for us. We're continuing to make sure that we change the product, adapt to evolving technologies, bring in new features every year to keep people kind of, I guess, engaged with the product. But we've certainly seen across Europe a pretty good and steady growth, and then obviously accelerated in some markets over the last few years.
How important to audience? I want to go back to Sheriff Wall a little bit in a second. I'm just curious, how important are local stars to the growth of audiences? So, for example, in the UK, I think there's a number of players that are now playing in the NFL, maybe through UK's NFL pathways. And Rufus, obviously, you guys have a host of athletes across different markets that I'm sure would pique interest in different ways. How really important are those local stars to those markets? Perhaps starting with you, Charlotte.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think really important. Local relevance is a key, I think, to driving growth and fan growth. We've been really lucky in the last few years to have a few UK talent then making it into the NFL, and I think one from a marketing lens, it gives us a really nice story. I think many people probably know the Christian Wade story, and last preseason, him being able to play and in the preseason obviously gave us a really nice hook in terms of driving people into our products, driving people to our broadcast, and driving people onto our social channels and building up our kind of digital presence. So for me, we see huge success when content we create is more locally relevant and again gives people that reason to care within their current lives.
When someone comes on the scene like a Christian Wade and creates that buzz through, particularly on the top of the funnel marketing side, the social media side, etc., do you think that could directly lead to subscriptions? And that's the same for you, Rufus. But Charlotte, do you think that having those UK stars will directly lead to more people signing up for OTT subscriptions?
Yeah, I mean, I think eventually, I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier around let's create that emotional connection first. Let's get people to really care and give us up time for the sport on a regular basis, and then let's monetize. So I certainly think that there is a world where one does lead to the other, but it's not a quick turn on a switch. Christian Wade's playing, everyone's going to buy OTT. It's certainly a journey that people need to go on.
And Rufus, from your side, not only with Golf TV, but also more widely from a rights perspective, I imagine you would see huge disparities in rights values and deals that are being done, depending on the local stars that you have, particularly across all the markets you have. How significant really is it? Does it almost act like a switch? Once you have a famous player, they leave. Does that market really just dip immediately, or do you see it stays relatively flat?
No, 100%. I mean, I probably shouldn't say this, but if we've got a deal in Thailand coming up, we'll ask our player liaison guys to make sure that we've got some Thai players playing on events the couple of weeks beforehand. I mean, it really is incredibly valuable. And actually, I mean, local heroes, for us, we're not always going to get the top players playing every week on our events because there's so many other places they can play. But actually having the local heroes at their home event is really critical for us. We actually introduced a rule about 3 or 4 years ago that the players, as well as playing 4 events each year to play Ryder Cup, also have to play their home event. But because for us, actually, the event that we have in Sweden, the Nordea Masters, it doesn't really matter if Rory McIlroy's not there, as long as Henrik Stenson, who's the local hero, is there. So we always make sure that the local hero is playing in their market, even if they're not a top 5 player in the world, they're a name and it's someone who people want to support. And the other example of that is we've had since we've come back, we had a 6-week swing in the UK, and some of the top guys weren't able to come back because they live in Florida and there's travel restrictions. But we've had UK winners over the last couple of weeks or so, a chap called Sam Horsfield. And actually the ratings on Sky have been great because people want to engage and support the local favourite. So I think it's incredibly important.
So we've only got a couple of minutes left, so I'm going to try and quit through the last few questions pretty quickly here, and also go through a few more poll questions from the audience as well. Again, this session's been about share of wallet. We've touched upon a few things. I think we'd like to get, if there's any more sense of, I'd have one question around share of wallet really, and that is to do with how we don't really see a lot of e-commerce integrated into OTT platforms yet. Curious, Rufus, is quickly, Golf TV doesn't have much of an e-commerce offering directly built into their OTT offering. And how far is that sort of thing away from them? I know you mentioned it briefly, but you talked about merchandise slightly, but is there something that's already integrated, and how far away is it?
No, it's a really good question. I think it's something that would be very close on their development pipeline in terms of things they want to do. I mean, ultimately, everyone is trying to sell content and everyone is trying to sell e-commerce. But as you say, that integration doesn't really exist at the moment. I think the American, the big American franchises do it a lot better than we do in Europe at the moment. But I think it is something, as you start to see private equity and more institutional money come into sport and invest in some of this stuff, I think you'll see it a lot more over the next 6, 12, 18 months or so.
And Charlotte, from your perspective, we talked about OTT driving subscription through marketing and so forth. Are you also trying to drive those sales up across merchandise? And you guys are measuring the effect of how that has across the wider average revenue per fan?
Yeah. So we will continue to use all of our platforms to try and drive share of wallet across multiple things. I think, going back to your point on integration in terms of products, using the product to then integrate a partner in, or try and drive, like, say, merchandise into a product. I think certainly agree with Rufus that it's something that probably we'll start to see more of over the coming months and years. But I think we're ultimately, when you're doing those types of things, I think you need to do it in the right way. You need to be thinking about the customer first and the personalized journey that they will take. And certainly I think the ability to do it right kind of outweighs the ability to do it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I can see Will's now popped up, so I'm going to hand it back over to him. But thanks very much to Rufus and Charlotte. And over to you, Will.
The SportsPro Podcast is published by SportsPro Media. The producer is Ed Dixon.